This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So, in last session, we discussed about the state and how can we update the component state by using some events, on-click event, and we seen, and we already seen the life cycle methods. Sorry, we didn't discuss life cycle methods, right? So, how can we update the state in inline? So, inline state updation as well as by calling a function. How can we update the state as well as we seen previous state? What is the concept of previous state? Always it's a good idea to use previous state. I think it is going to be give you proper results if you can use previous state property with a callback function. Okay, so we know that the state concept is available within the class component only. Here we have one more concept. The concept is going to be life cycle methods of React class component. Life cycle methods of React class component. This is very important. Class component. We don't have life cycle methods in functional component. We have these methods in class component only. So generally in the life cycle methods, there are three phases are there, Andy. So one is mounting phase, and one more is updating phase, and one more is unmounting phase, unmounting phase, and one more is error handling also. How can we handle the error? There are almost all. These are the things. All the life cycle methods, I'm telling you. So in a class, we can create our own methods. Yesterday we seen, right? So increment counter, increment by 5. These are our own methods, right? We created. And one more thing, render is our own method? No. Constructor is our own method? No. These are the predefined methods of the class component. Render is the only method which is used for displaying the output. Constructor is also predefined method. So, and if you can define them like this, so we have some methods, right? Increment counter. So these are our methods exactly. So this is increment counter, and increment by 5 are the methods belongs to us. So we define these methods and we're accessing wherever you want. But the methods constructor and render are the predefined. Okay, those methods will get called automatically. We don't want to do anything for it. Okay, right, remember carefully. All the life cycle methods life cycle methods are predefined by React. So these methods are defined by React by default, so we don't want to do anything, right? One more very important point, these life cycle methods, remember this point, very important, will call automatically 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 based on the activities in the component, based on the activities in the component. And the component, I mean, generally you define increment counter, increment by 5, some methods you defined earlier, right? You can say increment counter, decrement counter, reset counter. These are the methods. These methods defined by you, and you have to call whenever you want. Whenever you have to call it manually. There is no other solution here. What I'm telling you, all these life cycle methods are called automatically. We don't want to call them. You don't want to call the methods, and these methods will call automatically based on the situation. For example, when we are created a component and we are inserting into the app.js, right? Once the component is created, we will move the component to app.js. That is called, actually, when we are inserting the component, then there are some lifecycle methods will be called automatically. When you inserted, when you are executing, and there are going to be some lifecycle methods will call automatically. For example, you are updating the values of the component, nothing but that may be a state or props, whatever it may be, then some lifecycle methods will be called automatically. When I am removing the component, I'm adding the component, then adding component is nothing but adding component into the DOM tree. So I want to tell you like this. DOM tree is nothing but adding component into your app.js. Okay now. So here I want to tell you unmounting means removing the component or hiding the component, and removing, or I want to write something called hiding the component. Removing or hiding the component from the DOM tree. So then these methods will call automatically when we are updating the state of the component. For example, uh, uh, these methods are called these methods are called these methods are called automatically when there is a change in the state. These methods are called if if there is any change in the state, any update, and nothing but you are updating the state, right? That is nothing but updating lifecycle methods. Okay, but what are the methods are there in the updating phase? These methods are called automatically when we created a component and we inserted into the DOM tree. So now adding or inserting, you can write this word adding or inserting the component into the DOM tree. So whatever it may be, both are same, removing or hiding, right? Whatever it may be. So this is exactly the concept of mounting. Here we have four methods, and the constructor is a method, render is a method. Let us write this as per order. Constructor, we have static method, get derived, derived state from props is a method. Okay, these are the methods we are having. And finally we have something called component did mount is also one more method. These are the four methods, and available in the phase of mounting. These four methods will call automatically based on the situation. So now we have updating methods also. Let me write updating methods also. In the updating methods also, if you can check this, this is the same. Get derived state from props will be there, render method will be there. uh, should component update, okay, this is what we need to check it. So to this we can pass the previous state, or sorry, next state or something like this. We can pass next state comma next props, comma next state. Okay, these are the method. Get a snapshot before update, this is also one method. Predefined methods all are right. So finally component did update, and component did update, this is not did mount, did update, right? Component will unmount, there is only one method. So component will unmount is the method. Okay, right. So these are the methods we are having, Andy. Okay, so later we can discuss about all the things, no need to worry about it, right? First let me talk about the mounting phase methods. Once these mounting phase methods are completed, then we can go for the updating phase. One by one we can discuss. Okay, we know that what is a constructor. So constructor is the best place for initializing the logics. We know that in the class basics we discussed exactly class basics. What is a constructor? We know that whatever the logics we are writing inside a constructor, they are going to be available inside each and every of your class method. That's the reason we are defining the state in the constructor. So always when you're initializing the state, it is all happen in the constructor only. Now what I want to tell you, constructor is the best place to initialize the state, right? So I have already these points I written. I will share you this document with you guys. 1 minute, let me go and check this. 8 p.m 8 a.m UAE React lifecycle methods. Now you can see I have already written in the constructor, already the points are available with me. Constructor is a special function that will get called whenever component object is created. Some reusable logics we can write here. It is the best place to initialize the state. We can bind the event handler also, and we cannot perform Ajax calls or a HTTP request in the constructor handling. For performing Ajax calls, and there is a separate place that we can use it. And this is the purpose of constructor. If you can see, there is something called get a derived state from props. You can check this method also, derived state from props. This method will invoke right before calling the render method. It should return an object to update the state or null on update nothing. Can you see what these people are saying that? Remember, we know render method will call every time, right? So that's sure, we are very nice. So render method will call for every change in the state. That's we know already. But remember carefully, before every render, we know that already we see in the previous session. If there is a change in the state, render method will be called automatically now. So if there is a change in the state, render method will re-render, right? So we know that re-renders. Render method will re-renders. We know that. Before render method calling, if for example, if render method is calling 100 times, before render method calling, this method will call automatically. Get data set from props. What this method will do, if the things are required, we can modify the state and we can change the state and we can pass the state to render method to display it. And so before displaying data, who will display the data? Render method. Render method is the person to display the data. Before displaying data, this method will call automatically. So we know that if there is a change in the state, render method will be called. But if render method is calling before the render method, this method will call this method will call. So you may ask us, sir, why it has to call before render method? For example, you have some state. So you want to modify the state or you want to verify the state. Is there any something wrong in the state values or anything user is logged in or not? Something you want to verify before displaying output, this method will call, right? So in this method, we can verify the state and in this method, we can verify the state. So whether the state is proper or not. So once state is verified, then automatically render method will collect the state. It will display the data into the screen. That is what. That's the reason before render method for every render get a derived state from props method will be called. Simply says, okay, this is one thing. And we know that constructor is always called immediately. Constructor, right? Render method is the only method which is mandatory in a class for displaying the output. You can see. So the next render. This is the only method which is required in the component. Read props and state to return the JSX. This method is responsible for displaying the output. For every change in the state, this render method gets called automatically, nothing but re-rendered. So we cannot update the state here. We cannot perform the HTTP request. Right, exactly. This is what exactly the purpose of render method. And we can use set state to update the state here. We know what is the set state method. It is used to update the state. We cannot perform Ajax calls inside of it, and we cannot perform Ajax calls inside of it, Andy. Right, exactly. This is the thing. Render method. And finally, if you can see, this is the mostly used method, Andy. Component did mount. Remember carefully, render method will call every time. If render method is calling, derived state from props method also call every time. So simply says, if render method call 100 times, get a derived state from props also will call 100 times. Because before every rendering, the GDSFE, get derived state from method will be called automatically. But this component did mount method will call only one time. It will never call multiple times, Sunday. Right? This is the best place to perform the Ajax call, seriously. If you want to send an Ajax request, nothing but Axios request, whatever it may be, and this is the one of the best place to implement the HTTP request, Ajax calls, right? So it is invoked after the component and its child components rendered to the DOM. See, after DOM has been completely loaded, finally did mount method will be called. Here we can also bind the events, guys. Here, what is event binding? We will see later. I think in JavaScript we've seen a concept called add event listener, remove event listener. By using that concept, we can add events to an element, right? The same we will implement here, right? This is component did mount. Let me talk about the first these four, then we can go for the updating lifecycle method, right? So now I'm going to create a new file. So let me create a file with the name called lifecycle. life cycle cycle.js. Okay, file name is your choice completely. You don't need to save it as life cycle. You can take any name here. I'm creating as a class component RCE. Yes. Right. So let me have some heading here. First, I will show you the execution flow, which method will call first, which method will call later, right? Now you can see. So I'm just writing life cycle methods. Okay, these are the life cycle methods. Let me insert this component into the app.js. I'm going to app. So let me import this life cycle cycle life cycle component is imported. Let me remove this counter one, counter two from this page. I don't want these. Perfect. So only we have lifecycle component only. If we can run the file localhost colon 3000, we can see lifecycle methods. So inside of it, lifecycle component. And one more thing, without fail, remember, lifecycle methods are available in class only. We don't have lifecycle methods in the functional component. Then you may have a question maybe, sir, lifecycle methods are there to implement such a kind of functionalities like updating and mounting and unmounting. Such a phases we are implementing by using the lifecycle methods. How can we implement the same functionality in a functional component? For this, there is a concept called hooks, Hooks. Hooks concept is there that we will talk about later. Right. Once this is completed, then we can go for the hooks concept. Right. Now, here lifecycle methods, let me do one thing. In this, I am writing a message console.log of render, R-E-N-D-E-R, render method. Okay. If we can press F12, we can see render method is going to be displayed here, Andy. Why? Because we just written when the component is displaying output, render method is called automatically. Yes, render method is called in the console. Okay. Let me go for constructor also. Right now, state I'm not taking anything. Now, console.log of, you can write something. Constructor, I'm writing simply something called constructor name. You can take this as a render. Now you can see which one will be called first. Always constructor is the first one who will call. After calling constructor, then only remaining methods will be called. Now you can see, if you can see, constructor is always calling first and render is calling later. But you may think, sir, constructor we written first, right? That's why it is calling first. Huh? No, you can write this method here. You can check this. Still, constructor will always call first. Whatever the method order may be, you can define a method at the top of the class and bottom of the class, but it will always look for constructor. If constructor is there, that will get called automatically. Right? Okay. This is what exactly the constructor and it. Next method we have, this is the static method, static get derived state from props. Right, this is the predefined function, you have to take it. Now you can see I'm not writing anything. Let me do one thing, console.log. I won't write get derived state from props. I'm taking like this, Andy. Okay, now don't worry, you can just take like this. Now if you can refresh, you can see order of execution, Andy. Constructor called gdsfp is calling before render method. Can you see before render method gdsfp is calling, but there is an error, Andy. But you can check the error. Lifecycle class get a derived state from props. A valid state object should be returned, Andy. So what they are saying, Ante, at least you should return null. Okay, if you don't have any state, you should return null. So I don't have any state manipulation here right now. I want to return null. Okay, this method should have a value called something. It actually, null is an object. You can return null or you can return a valid state object. This is what exactly the answer you are able to see. A valid state object or null must be returned. Null is also object, right? Yes. Now if you can save this file, I'm going to refresh. We don't have any error. Now you can see the order of execution. Constructor calling first. Before render method, always GDSFE get derived state from props method will be called. And finally, I won't write one more method. Component did mount. Did mount is the thing, Andy. Right. So now you can see console.log And you can check this. I'm taking this as a component did mount. Okay, component did mount, something like this I'm taking. Okay, now you can check this. Order of execution, you can see, first of all, first constructor will be called lifecycle methods. Did you call any method? No, these methods gets called automatically. That's why they become lifecycle methods maybe, right? So constructor, GDSFE, render, and component did mount. This is the order of execution. This method will call after component has been completely loaded. After component has been completely loaded, finally this method will be called, right? Before render method, GDSFP will be called. Before that, whatever it may be, you may have 1,000 methods in your class. First constructor will be called. First constructor will be called, after the GDSFP will be called, after the render method, after that component did mount, right? This is the order of execution of our class component. Okay, but I want to show you one small thing. As of now, we implemented such a kind of such a things in the JSX, right? Increment, decrement, something we implemented, right? Let me show you one small proof of concept here. I told you, if there is a change in the state, render method will re-render. And I already told you one more point here. Before render method, GDSFP method will be called automatically. I mean, get data state from method will call automatically. Let me show you the proof here. I'm taking one button here. Okay, take a button. I'm taking something called increment. Okay, I'm taking something called increment. Definitely on click this, we have to increment the value now. So on click equal to, let us define my function, this dot increment counter is a function which I'm going to define. This is your function. So increment counter equal to that, we can do like this only. Okay now, all right, what shall we do here? We can update the state, so we don't have any state. So let us go and define the state. Where is the constructor? You take in the constructor at the bottom of the page. Okay, you can take anywhere. Place is your choice completely, but most of the people will write constructor on the top of the class. If you want, you can write bottom of the class also, but don't worry, when an object created, it will look for constructor. If the constructor is there, that will be executed automatically. Let me take one counter equal to 0. This is object. So now I want to display the counter here, this dot state dot counter, this dot state dot counter. Okay, if you can refresh the page, you can see the counter value is 0. Right now you can check this. On increment this, we have to update the set state now. This dot set state. Let me write prev state syntax. Callback function, update the state here. So to this, we have to pass a parameter called prev state. So here we have to update the counter colon prev state dot counter plus 1. Simply we can write like this, and now you can check this. Now you can see on load, these things are called, and constructor will call only one time, component did mount will call only one time. I told you, right? I'm cleaning the console. You can click increment button. What are calling, and constructor is calling or did mount is calling? No, they are one time calling methods, did mount as well as GDSFP. If you want to execute a logic only one time, these are the places. What is the only one time? Component did mount is the best place to write the one time logics. For example, I want to send a request to server, and I want to send a request to server. You want to send multiple times? Not required, right? If you can write the Ajax call inside the render method, for every change, Ajax call will be triggered. Every change, Ajax will hit the server. But it's not the good idea to write Ajax calls inside render method and GDSFP. Both methods will call every time when there is a change in the state. So these two are not the best place. You can see whenever you are calling for every change in the state, these two methods are calling. As of now, what we know, if there is a change in the state, render method will call. We know that. But now the lifecycle method, before render method, we can see GDSFP method will call every time. Okay. So now one more thing here we want to see. All right, this is constructor and render, perfect, right? So we are able to see the value, right? Okay, now you can see see here we have only one value kada. Now you can take something called username. Okay, you can take anything, no problem. Here I'm taking something called rom, my value I'm taking only. Now if you can check this, I want to display the username also. Let me go for here, h1 tag open, h1 tag close. I'm writing welcome to here this dot state dot username, and I'm taking username. Now you can see username is coming. So you want to take one more button, update name. I'm just taking this as a update name. I want to update the name. Okay, this is only one time updation. This is not value incrementation. Let me define one function for this also. I'm going to take update name. Okay now, right. This is going to be update name is equal to something. So we have to update the name, right? This dot set state again. To this proof state is not required. Simply I'm taking this as a username colon. Simply I'm taking this as a Teja live. Just I'm updating the static value to it. Okay now? Now you can see whatever it may be. Now you can see all four methods are calling. I'm incrementing. Now value is incrementing every time GDSFP render method is calling. Now you can see the problem here. I'm updating the name. Name is updated. On change this, these two are called. Okay, this is reason. Because there is a change in the state, it has to be called. Now can we see? I'm going to click on update name again. Is there any change happen? Teja live, Teja live, Teja. Same value now. Value is the same, but state is re-rendering. I mean your component is re-rendering. There is one condition here, guys. Here, previous value, current value, both are same. If both are same, why should I call my render method unnecessarily? Is there any change in the state? Nothing's changed, right? So there is no change. Teja live is updated, but you are clicking many times, but render method is calling, GDSFP method is calling. I don't want to call like this. So how can we restrict? This is simply says, if there is a change in the state, render method will be called. We know that. If there is a change in the state, render method will be called. But actually, there is no change. We are having the previous value only in the state. So then why should I update? Why should I call the render method again and again? I don't want to call the render method again and again. So how we can restrict it? So we have some updating methods, guys, here that I will explain you in the updating lifecycle method. Simply says, we know that one thing. If there is a change in the component, render method will re-render. Okay, fine. But the state is changing with the same value. There is no change in the state. You are clicking update button every time Teja live is updating now, the same value is updating every time, but there is no change in the state now. If there is no change in the state, I don't want to re-render my component. If change in the state, I have to re-render only. That's meaningful, right? So if there is no change in the value of the state, why should I re-render my component? If there is a change in the state, then I have to re-render the component. That's a meaningful, right? That how we can restrict. In the next session, updating lifecycle methods we can see. Now one more scenario. See, in the component did mount, what is the component did mount you have there? We binded an events, right? Can you see? This is an event. Now generally we return like this, right? Let me remove this. I'm removing this. In component did mount, we can bind events also, Andy. Let me take an id equal to uh, name. Okay, this is id equal to increment or something like this. I'm taking inc. Now you can see this is the ids of the two buttons. Actually, now if you can click on the buttons, nothing will be happen. Why? Because the function is not assigned to anyone. Now you can see, now I'm incrementing, nothing is calling. I'm updating name, nothing is calling. Why? Because we didn't bind the function to the button. How can we bind events to this button, Andy? As of now, we written manually on click on the button. No, on load the page in the runtime, how can I add an event? By using add event listener and remove event listener. Generally, what is the best place to add an event to an element? Render? No, render method is calling every time. No, it is not the good place. GDSFP, this is also not called. This is also not best place to add an event. Constructor, before render method, constructor will be called, and that is also not good place. So now I want to add an event to a element. Sorry, I want to add an event to this element. The best place, once the DOM has been completely loaded, The finally component did mount method is going to be called, right? Let us add an event in this place. Once DOM has been loaded, the component did mount is going to be called. This is one time, that is one time. Right now you can see I'm going to write document dot get element by ID. So what is the ID we have? So we have an ID with the name called inc, right? Inc dot add event listener is a method. To this I want to add the click event comma the function ID. You define the function, right? This dot increment counter. This is the way you have to add it only. So then what this will do, once DOM has been loaded, this will be called lastly, and it will add an element, sorry, it will add an event to an element ID. So the next thing is also, we have update name function, right? We have update name function on click. So what is this is guys here? Just the ID is going to be name. Now you can see this will work as we expected. So now you can see incrementing, yes, and update name, it is also working fine. So this is the best place. Actually, if you don't want to add an event, we can add event in inline also. On click, you can add here, no problem. But I'm just showing you, and this is the one of the best place. If you want to execute one time logic, how many times you want to bind an event? One time is enough, na? If you want to bind an event to an element, this is the best place. Component did mount is the best place, and we can add an event to an element and we can execute the logic. This will be called only one time. That too, component has been completely loaded. This is called component lifecycle methods, that to one phase, that is called updating phase only. But remember, one more time, you can check these points. I will share you these points with you. So can I share you these 4 points with you? Right, I'm sharing you in the chart window, Kiran. Just copy these points so that it will be helpful to you. Right, I just sent you in the chart window. Please copy all these points, right? So and make a note proper, because why I given some theoretical knowledge here. In interview, definitely they will ask us about the life cycle methods, definitely. uh, as an experienced person, as a fresher, without this question there is no interview. So you should understand what are the life cycle methods are there. Okay, right. So this is exactly the concept of life cycle methods, that to mounting phase. Constructor is will always call first. Render method, we know that for every change in the state, render method will re-render. Before re-rendering, derived state from props method will call automatically. Component did mount is a method that will call only one time throughout the component life cycle. Throughout the component life cycle, only one time. Constructor also only one time. Did mount also call only one time. So you may ask us, but remember, sir, if a constructor calling one time and component did mount is also calling one time, both are one time methods only. The one time logics we can write inside the component did mount. One time logics we can write here, I told you. But constructor is also one time, right? Then why don't we bind these events in the constructor? Remember carefully. First constructor will be called, not render method. If render method call first, we can write these events in the constructor. Why? Remember carefully. At the time of constructor calling, your DOM is not ready. Your DOM is not ready. If I can write document.getElement by ID, there is no DOM. But how can I get the element by ID? So before rendering, we cannot access an element, right? So we have to render the HTML, JSX should be rendered. After rendering, then only we can get the element by ID. So if I can write the logic in the constructor get element by ID, how can I get the element by ID here? Now you can see I am writing ID console.log document dot get element by ID. Just I'm trying to get element by ID. This is going to be inc, something I'm taking ID increment. Right now you can see what is the output we are going to get it. Can we see? So it is giving you null. Na? It is giving you null. I mean constructor is calling first. Right now you can write the same here in the component did mount. You cannot get the null and you will get the data. Now you can see component did mount I am writing here. After DOM has been rendered, it will be called, right? Now you can go and check this. We don't have any problem. This time this is calling the button, right? And why this is not calling? At this constructor calling, this render method does not display the JSX. If that is displaying the JSX, we can access the element, right? So this type of logics, initialization kind of logics, always you should write inside the component did mount only, not in the constructor. Remember, constructor call one time, component did mount also one time throughout the life cycle. But when to write what, that's very, very, very important. When there is some constructor, right, it is calling before render method. Before render method, we don't have anything here, right? Okay, so you can do the such a kind of logics in the constructor. Always you have to perform those logics in the component did mount, right? Okay, just I'm giving you an idea. So in the next thing, what we will do, updating lifecycle methods, both the combination, the same file we can reuse again. So let us see how can we work with the updating lifecycle methods. But maybe I will go a little bit slow here because these methods are very, very important. I will go concept by concept. Once updating completed, then I can go for unmounting. So then only concept will be very clear. So this is the concept about mounting based lifecycle methods, when they will be called, how they will be called. They all the lifecycle methods, it may be updating, unmounting, whatever it may be, they will get called automatically. We don't want to call them based on the situation, based on the activity happening in the component. Those methods will call automatically. So render method and GDSFP calling automatically when there is a change in the state. So this constructor calling only one time, and component did mount is also calling only one time. They are not calling multiple times. If the DOM is if the component is inserted into the DOM, constructor will be called, render component did mount is also going to be called. This is the concept we have exactly. In the tomorrow session, I will talk about updating lifecycle methods. Okay, so I think this may be some big concept, and we have to give you more clarity in the updating lifecycle methods that we can see tomorrow.